Everybody? Welcome in to another episode of the NFL Seekers podcast. Today, we're going to be predicting the 2024 NFL head coaching carousel, a different video for us. It's a bonus episode for 500 subscribers. So thank you guys for the support. And yeah, we're excited about this one. We're just off-season nerds. We love kind of seeing how things play out in the off-season. And we're going to try to predict as best as we can where the top head coaches land for kind of the head coach needy team. So I'm actually really excited for this one. If you're a team that already fired their head coach, this should be a really fun video for you. So I like your Chargers. How are you, Stores?
Yeah, no, this is right up my alley for my type of content. We're analytical nerds. We love all the ins and outs, and even the coaching hires, the GM candidates, the draft. This is some of the most fun stuff for us. So I'm super excited to get in this one, especially when it has something to do with my team being involved. But yeah, this should be a pretty fun one. And thank you guys for 500 subscribers. Is awesome. Let's get to next goal of 1,000.
Yep, we're getting there. Thank you guys for the support. And we'll start it off with the Chargers. We'll start off with your Chargers. That has to be the most attractive spot of all the head coach needy teams. It just has to be with Herbert being in LA. They have a lot of stars. We saw this season their team still has a long way to go. The roster still has a long way to go, but this probably does have to be the most attractive spot. And we'll start with the Chargers because I think this is where a lot of the dominoes will start to fall. So let's get into it and let's hear your top three Charger head coaching candidates in order here.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna do a quick little preview. Like you said, it has to be the top, coaching. This is where everyone's gonna want to go. It's gonna affect a lot of different teams, and a lot of different head coaching candidates based on this job. And the reason is because of Mr. Justin Herbert. That is the most attractive spot because you have a franchise quarterback right at your helm. And so that's what's gonna attract a lot of these coaches to this job. And yes, I will get into my top three now. And so number one for me is going to be Mr. Jim Harbaugh. Botched that one. Jim Harbaugh, Michigan coach right now, has a track record in the NFL, also a former quarterback of the Chargers. Wherever Jim Harbaugh seems to go, he seems to be a winner. He went to I think it was 4-11 49ers, who were terrible over a span of 5 years, and he goes and turns them into an 11-4 football team overnight. So it's pretty incredible. He's changed the culture in Michigan. He is just an absolute winner, and he's kind of a freak. And what did owner Dean Spanos say to the Chargers after he fired Brandon Staley? Tom Telesco goes, "We need a new vision. We need a winner. We need somebody to change this culture." And Jim Harbaugh would be the easiest answer for that. He is a culture changer. I know he's a little bit hard to work with. He's hard-headed, but Jim Harbaugh is a winner. And this one is just the dream scenario. It makes way too much sense. It would just all the it would just be it almost just be the perfect coach for the Chargers. And you could just see him and Justin Herbert's personalities actually working really well together because Justin Herbert is very underspoken. He's very quiet. And then you have, a real outspoken leader like Jim Harbaugh, which would just be absolutely perfect to me.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'll be honest, I didn't put Harbaugh in my top three because it just feels really obvious. I knew you would have it in here, and he's obviously a top three option for the Chargers. It's just he's really hard to kind of put on even a list because you have no idea if he's going to the NFL or not. But you just sent me something on Instagram saying that he signed with a new agent that also is kind of associated with the Chargers. So that is interesting. He's making some changes and he hasn't accepted that 10-year offer from Michigan. So, I mean, if this happened, it would just be a huge culture change. It does remind me of like the opposite of Sean Payton and Russell Wilson with Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. I really do think they would mesh really well. Their personalities would kind of complement each other perfectly. So I do agree that Harbaugh would be kind of a dream. And let's get to your number two option because that's also a dream.
Yes, and a number two dream option would be Mr. Ben Johnson, a very forward-thinking coach, an offensive coach. So we're trying to change up the culture. We're kind of going away from what Brandon Staley was. I feel like that's what the fans need and want. I feel like chairman owner Dean Spanos knows that, and so obviously the number two dream option would be offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who, if you've watched this podcast, you've known me and Danny both love Ben Johnson and what he is able to do with a Jared Goff led offense with, I mean, essentially Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds as wide receivers 2 and 3. It's quite incredible. I mean, even last night, if you guys watched the Cowboys Lions game, I mean, he damn near calls everything perfect. And the drive, the 2 minute drive at the end was beautiful. And the the 2 point conversion ultimately came up short. Even those play calls were incredible. But yeah, Ben Johnson is just a very forward thinking. He stems originally from, I think he's got ties to, I believe it was the McVay tree. I believe he was in, wasn't he with sorry, should have had this in my notes. Wasn't he with Shanahan at some point too? Do you know that?
I honestly don't know if Ben Johnson was with Shanahan. I'll have to look.
Yeah, I know he's under a whole bunch of different coaching regimes. He comes from a different stem of, forward. Oh, sorry. Sean Payton is actually who he originally comes from. Sorry, excuse me. Dan Campbell and Sean Payton ties, and I believe there was Sean McVay ties at one point. But yeah, Ben Johnson, one of the most forward thinking, you know, minds in football right now, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And that's where you're really lacking with Justin Herbert. And I mean, what he's done with Jared Goff, who I would argue, I mean, Justin Herbert has way more talent, than Jared Goff ever could have. And so that would be a really fun option. And then just to really sum it up, I mean, Bill Belichick just kind of has seemed like an option the whole time. And he just seems like a guy that, I wouldn't be thrilled. I feel like he has to be number 3 on here. I wouldn't be thrilled with it, but he seems like a guy that can come in here and completely shift the organization, bring a winning defense and bring a different mentality to the Chargers. Because that's just, I mean, he's the greatest coach of all time. This guy's won more Super Bowls than anyone. He might seem a little washed at this point, but at the end of the day, he's still Bill Belichick. He still has a top 10 defense every year, it seems like. And I mean, he's a winner at heart. So that's why I had to throw him on my list. But I mean, really 1 and 2 are my most exciting options.
Yeah, like that list a lot. You can't really be mad at any of these options. I didn't put Bill Belichick on my list for the Chargers because I just feel like the Chargers having a guy like Herbert should go in a different direction with a younger coach. I would honestly even like Brian Flores or McDonald more than Belichick just because I like the youth kind of being in LA, but you can't be mad obviously with a proven winner like Belichick. I'll go to my top three. My number one is your number two, Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator. It pretty much is just Sean Payton, kind of a regen here. It's just a young Sean Payton candidate, and he's the dream candidate for pretty much every single team needing a head coach. So if the Chargers can get this locked in, and the rest of the dominoes follow the other ways, then I think the Chargers will kind of be winning the offseason if they can just lock in Ben Johnson. I think it is like a Sean Payton type of deal, and him and Justin Herbert would just be beautiful. We see how well the Lions' run game is. He just pushes the right buttons at the right times, always calling the right plays at the right time. I just love Ben Johnson, everything he does. I think it complements Herbert and the Chargers perfectly. So that is my dream option for the Chargers. And then 2 and 3, I have Brian Flores and Mike McDonald. I do think if you can't get Ben Johnson, I do think just going the veteran route, like a younger veteran defensive mind is the move. I think Brian Flores, he's obviously proven. He proved for the Dolphins he could be a great head coach, and I think he complements Herbert well, just getting a good offensive coordinator in there and getting a good mentality, a good culture setter in there like Brian Flores, and then Mike McDonald's kind of like a cheaper Jim Harbaugh. He has ties to Jim Harbaugh from Michigan. He is a really good defensive mind as we've seen from the Ravens. So I do think he would be like a suit up Staley, just a upgrade to Staley. So honestly, any of these options would make me happy for the Chargers.
No, I absolutely love you putting Brian Flores and Mike McDonald on this list. Brian Flores would kind of bring that military type, strict, personality. It's just everything's done on a dot. There's just every I is dotted and every T is crossed kind of mentality, which the Chargers need. It seems like everyone on that team needs a kick in the ass and to be just on. They kind of need that military type presence. And Brian Flores would definitely bring that. And kind of what he's done with that Vikings defense is quite incredible. Um, I mean, he's flipped. I would argue that the Vikings defense is kind of bottom tier to, top tier, and he's done it in a very unique way and in his own way. So he would be a great candidate. And then Mike McDonald, yes, who is kind of essentially a predecessor to John and Jim Harbaugh. So yeah, Mike McDonald's kind of worked his way up in the Baltimore Ravens organization, then ultimately went to Michigan and was their defensive coordinator for a year, and kind of changed their defense. They were one of the best defenses in college football that year, and then proceeds to come back to the Ravens and do this, which is just incredible. So I mean, he's learned from both John and Jim. He's obviously a first-time head coaching candidate, but I mean, a very, very promising, exciting track record behind him, and obviously the Ravens have the number one defense in the NFL, so you'd love to see something like that. So I absolutely love those two candidates.
Yeah, you got to be excited for the Chargers because there's a lot of good fits, a lot of good options. But I do agree. I think the main thing the Chargers need is just a culture change, a mentality change. Mostly, they do need a kind of a hard-nosed coach in there. So if not Ben Johnson, I do think a veteran defensive guy is the move. Anything else you want to say in the Chargers before we move to the Raiders?
Oh, this is where all the dominoes fall, though, like you said right at the beginning. So this will probably ultimately be the first head coach hiring. Everyone's gonna, kind of wait to see who gets this job, and then the rest of the dominoes will fall after this.
Yeah, so it's gonna be very interesting to see, and we'll move on to the Raiders. This one we put in here because there is technically a head coach controversy, but I mean, let's be real. There's only one option. End of story. We'll just kind of get it out of the way. We both think that Antonio Pierce, at least I am pretty sure that Antonio Pierce will be their coach, and I definitely do think he deserves it. He's just coached tremendously ever since he stepped in. That defense has been like a really, really good defense, and they weren't really competent before him. So it's honestly crazy how he has that team playing as a motivator. As a motivator, he's got to be one of the best already. It's fun, and I just think the Raiders have to lock in Antonio Pierce, this young, motivating coach who has his players playing with their heads on fire as their head coach. Do you agree?
I do agree, and one of the reasons I agree is because of financial situations. The Raiders had signed John Gruden to a 10-year, like $100 million contract, and obviously, I don't know what they had to pay out, but the legal situations behind that ultimately ended that. And then they go and they proceed to sign Josh McDaniels to a really to a few-year big contract, and he doesn't last very long. So the Raiders are still out here paying two other coaches. Um, and at this point, Antonio Pierce meshes well with your team. He's got the players. I mean, he's a locker room guy. He's got the players playing hard, and affordability and salary reasons. He seems to make just all the sense in the world. He comes in here, you go in here, you just have two dominant wins in a row. Now coming towards the end of the season, you go and knock off the Chiefs. You beat the Chargers, and put 63 on their heads. It's just he's kind of changed this locker room, and the player, he seems to be a player's guy, and I think that's kind of what the Raiders need. And yeah, this one just makes too much sense. You don't go out there and you don't go spend big money on an old veteran coach. You go with this young guy who's a player's guy who fights for the players, and they fight for him. So it makes too much sense in the world just to roll with Antonio Pierce.
He is just the epitome of a Raider. He just fits the Raiders perfectly. I'm really excited to see what he's like moving forward for them. As a Broncos fan, I'm a little bit scared of him. He's a really good coach. But we'll move on to the next team, the Carolina Panthers, who, in my opinion, are honestly the second most attractive spot other than the Chargers. Just getting to work with Bryce Young. I
Can I,
think
sorry, can I cut you off real quick? Just
yeah,
going back to the Raiders. The Raiders signed Josh McDaniels to a 6-year deal worth approximately $10 million per season. So they have a lot of money tied up in the coaches. Just sorry, just a side note, and then we'll move on to the Panthers.
their last two coaching hires just did not work out at all. They were just complete disasters. So that unfortunate for the Raiders, but yeah. Moving on to the Panthers, I do think this is the second most attractive spot. Just being able to work with the young Bryce Young, kind of figure him out. It's a fun project that I think a lot of people are going to want to take. Really excited to kind of see who goes in here. I think this after the Chargers hire someone, this is where the next domino will fall. I think the Panthers will get an early hire. So let's hear your top three options. I'm interested.
Obviously, we know who the Carolina's number one option is, and it kind of does fall on the Los Angeles Chargers to see how this one goes. But yes, the Panthers owner has made it very, very clear that Ben Johnson is their number one option. They want a guy who's offensive minded. They want a guy to come in here and take Bryce Young under his belt and and lead this offense and make something special out of it. So they have made it, and it's not, it's kind of, it's just the obvious number one because he is. That's they made it very clear. They tried to hire him last year. He opted to go back to Detroit, and his agent came out and said Ben Johnson's asking for around $15 million per season as a first time head coach, which is pretty wild. But I think the Panthers owner would have no problem paying $15 million a season for Ben Johnson. So the clear number one cut candidate. We'll see how the dominoes fall. Moving into number two, I think the Panthers would thrive with a coach like Brian Flores. He's going to be my number two for this team. He would bring that attitude, that culture, demeanor, that much needed strictness to this team. It's a very young team. You got a very promising young quarterback, and you need some kind of veteran military presence, and you need somebody that can really lead this defense, so Bryce Young doesn't have to do anything. And Brian Flores just fits that bill too much. And he changed that Vikings defense, not, just too much. He did a complete 180 turn. And, his defense is just too impressive for him not to be a head coaching candidate this year. So this one would make a lot of sense for me. And then, Mr. Brian Johnson, Danny's friend right here. I think he's up, for, the Eagles' next great head coach candidate. The Eagles this year are still 11 wins already. Jalen Hurts, I mean, just the way this offense runs, he's learned from Shane Steichen. He's gotten all, these gurus around him. He's learned from Jonathan Gannon. He's learned from Nick Sirianni. He was actually was he the head coach, or I can't remember, a quarterback's coach at Mississippi State, helped Dak Prescott's development substantially. I know Dak Prescott loves Brian Johnson. And so why not pair him up with a young guy like Bryce Young? And I think that would make so much sense. He's been around a lot of quarterbacks and helped them develop a lot, and you've seen it in the NFL and dating back to college.
Yeah, so Brian Johnson does have a really, really good background and resume. His resume kind of starts at Utah. He was the youngest ever offensive coordinator in college football history at Utah, and then he moved on over to Mississippi State to be their quarterback coach and happened to really help Dak Prescott develop and reach his potential. He was a fourth round pick, and he's one of the best NFL quarterbacks now. And Dak Prescott does credit a lot of that to Brian Johnson, and he moved on to Florida after that as their offensive coordinator, and he really helped Kyle Trask and Anthony Richardson's stocks. He really helped Anthony Richardson develop, as you can see. And then he moved to Philadelphia last year as a quarterback coach. And we all saw the big jump that Jalen Hurts took for the Eagles. That was a large part due to Brian, as Jalen Hurts stated in many interviews. And this year, as offensive coordinator, the Eagles are a top five offense. They're a top five scoring unit. And I think Brian Johnson is kind of that next Eagles coach in line. He has a really, really good background. And I think he would be like perfect for the task of kind of getting Bryce Young to reach his potential. With that track record of quarterbacks he's worked with, Dak Prescott, Anthony Richardson, Jalen Hurts, I think Bryce Young would just be perfect to kind of be next in line and for Brian to just hone in on his talents and just hone in on Bryce Young and build a whole team around him. So I do think that's a really fun fit. I'll tell you right now, he's my number two candidate for the Panthers. And then I did want to ask you for your Brian Flores. I do agree he's like a perfect CEO, military culture changer type for the Panthers. In that scenario, would Evero kind of just be like a head coach hire somewhere else, and then you just bring in a veteran CEO type hire here? Because Evero could be a head coach candidate.
Evero could actually, yeah, be a very good head coach, but I feel like Brian Flores has done that. He brings, the veteran experience a little bit more than Evero. He's managed the team. I think he'd be able to build, quite frankly, a little bit better of a coaching staff around him than Evero would. And so that was kind of the deciding factors to have Brian Flores above him.
Yeah, I think he would be a really, really good CEO for the Panthers if they couldn't get Ben Johnson. So I do like that. And I'll go on to my top three. I have obviously Ben Johnson at one. It goes without saying we don't really have to talk about it. They've had their hard eyes on him for years now. They've been wanting him to be their coach, and he's definitely their number one priority. And like I said with Brian Johnson, number two, it just feels perfect. I really want Brian Johnson to go somewhere where he can work with a young quarterback. And this is a hard situation. It's going to be a hard task for Brian to, fill out this roster and make them way more competitive than they were this year. It's a hard task, but I do think he'll at least help Bryce Young improve a lot. And then My third option is going to be Bobby Slowick, actually, the Texans offensive coordinator, first year offensive coordinator. He's been really fun, and I do like his analytical way of looking at things, and I do think he would be a good kind of compliment for Bryce Young to help Bryce Young develop, and he'd really hone in on Bryce Young's talents as well, similarly to Brian Johnson. So I like both of those backup options to Ben Johnson. I'm personally sticking with the offensive side.
Yeah, I really like that. Bobby Slowick, you kind of seen what he's been able to help and do. I mean, he's pretty much had full reins over the Texans offense. You know, he's not really micromanaged. Um, you know, so he's kind of the guy in charge of the offense, and you've seen what he's done with that offense with young CJ Stroud, and it's been very impressive. So why not poach, you know, why not go out and poach the other offensive coordinator, you know, from the rookie who's going to end up ultimately probably winning offensive rookie of the year, and then bring him over to your guy. So I would absolutely love to see Bobby Slowick.
And yeah, I just personally think it has to be an offensive guy because I really would love to keep Evero as defensive coordinator with one of these coaches. I think it would be a perfect pairing. So hopefully the Panthers get one of these options and we'll move on to the next team. We got the New England Patriots for the first time in a long time. They're going to be moving on from legendary Bill Belichick, finally kind of changing their culture, changing the ways they do things here. He was also like their GM, so it's going to be a big change for the Patriots, and it's going to be interesting. I feel like there's a lot of names we're going to talk about. So yeah, let's hear yours.
Yeah, getting into my number one, real quick. It's gonna be you know, Los Angeles Rams, Raheem Morris. I think Raheem Morris is kind of been a guy who's slowly been working his way up. And I think this might be the year that he finally gets his opportunity to be a head coach. But Raheem Morris has got a very, very good background. Obviously, he stems from Sean McVay, which is a very forward-thinking guy. And you've seen what Sean McVay and Raheem Morris have done with, you know, a very, very underwhelming Rams roster, and now they're playoff contention. And so if the Patriots ultimately move off of Bill Belichick, I could kind of see him going in a way like that, a more forward-thinking, a little bit younger guy. But then at the same time, I'll just move into my number two real quick. Dan Quinn also feels like a guy, you know, if they don't go the route we think they would if they move off of Bill Belichick, maybe they stick to their roots. They go with a veteran presence like Dan Quinn, who's been to a Super Bowl, who's been a proven defensive coordinator, who's been a winner. Anywhere he's gone, he's proved to be a winner. He's proved to have a very, very competitive defense. And Dan Quinn, it's kind of blows me away that Dan Quinn isn't a head coach. After what he's done. I mean, he took the Falcons to the Super Bowl, given it was one of the worst Super Bowl losses, you know, one of the most painful, brutal ones. You know, the 28-3. But you know, he's too good to not be a head coach at this point. I would give him more credit for the Cowboys being a good roster than I would Mike McCarthy, to be honest with you. I think he has done more with that defense, and that defense has ultimately been you know, their biggest superpower. And so Dan Quinn's been there, done that. And then just kind of one that most people probably haven't heard of or don't know too much about, but Steve Wilkes of the San Francisco 49ers. I feel like, you know, you move off of a winning head coach, you go to winning organizations, and you go to what you're kind of a little bit more familiar with. And San Francisco is a very, you know, winning organization. And Steve Wilkes, the defensive coordinator for the 49ers, has been around for a while. I mean, he's an older veteran head coach. He has the San Francisco, you know, they're arguably the best team in the NFL right now. Their defense is playing at an extremely high level, and I could see the Patriots feeling comfortable going, you know, in that kind of route. And so, what do you think for this team? It's kind of hard because you don't know, because the Patriots have just had Bill Belichick for so long.
Yeah, it really is kind of just a dart throw because you have no idea what direction they're going. I saw a report today saying that Josh McDaniels is going to get heavy consideration. So there you literally never know with these Raiders. I feel like your options are pretty unique. I like Raheem Morris a lot. We hear a lot of talk about Ajuro Evero as a future head coach, but he came up under Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris was his kind of coordinator. So I do think that Raheem Morris does deserve a shot. It kind of seems overdue, and this does seem like a really good fit for him. He's a good culture guy, obviously great defensive mind for the 49ers. So I do think that Raheem Morris does deserve a shot. It kind of seems overdue, and this does seem like a really good fit for him. He's a good culture guy, obviously great defensive mind for the 49ers. So I do think that Raheem Morris does deserve a shot. It kind of seems overdue, and this does seem like a really good fit for him. He's a good to keep that going with the Patriots. And I like you sticking with the defensive mind theme. Obviously, Dan Quinn feels like he needs to be a head coach, and he does feel like a Patriot. This honestly feels like a really fun fit. I could definitely see that. And then yeah, Steve Wilkes always does good filling in as an interim for the Cardinals, for the Panthers. He's done a good job, and yeah, for the Niners, they've been really good. So I do like all those defensive options that would be good culture mentality change for the Patriots. And I'll go into my because I went a completely different direction. I also did stick with the defensive mind of things, but I put Harbaugh at number one because I think this is where Harbaugh should go. I think this is what team should go all in for Harbaugh. It just feels like a perfect seamless transition from Bill Belichick to Jim Harbaugh. Similar cultures, similar kind of personalities, and then you stay with the popular coach. I honestly just think this is a perfect fit. I would love to see Harbaugh as a Patriot. What do you think about this? Is it too far fetched?
I don't think it's too far-fetched. Might be a little redundant if they're trying to move off of Bill Belichick, but at the same time, I mean, you get Jim Harbaugh, you just automatically you get rid of a winner and then you bring in a winner, and he would probably mesh very well with the Patriots ownership because Jim Harbaugh everywhere he goes, he kind of clashes with everyone. He's very power hungry, but the Patriots have given Bill Belichick all the power he's wanted. I mean, Bill Belichick is the GM and the head coach, and that's probably what Jim Harbaugh would be looking to do. And so, in that sense of things, that makes a lot of sense to me. So, I really like you bringing that up as a head coaching candidate because I didn't really honestly think about that, but you brought that up, and it makes me think that that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, as like a seamless Bill Belichick transition, it feels perfect. If you were to go a completely different route, if you wanted to completely change the culture, I do think a shout out would be like Bobby Slowick. I think that could be pretty fun, just completely changing this culture, getting a young offensive mind in there. That would be fun. But we'll go to my number two option, kind of sticking with this theme of just smooth transitions, and that's Gerard Mayo, Patriots legendary linebacker. He's done a great job helping out with that Patriots defense. He's one of the hotter young head coaching candidates. I remember the Broncos hired or interviewed him last year as their head coach, and they were pretty serious about him. So I do think Gerard Mayo deserves an opportunity, especially staying with the Patriots. It kind of is D'Amico Ryan's vibes, kind of a legendary former player that has done a good job as a coach. He's really a good motivator. He's good at relating with the players. So I do think Gerard Mayo would be a slept on kind of inside hire, and then my number three is Brian Flores. He's kind of similar to Gerard Mayo, just a little bit more proven, a little bit, more hard nosed, CEO type. So I do think all three of these options would be really, really fun and good transitions from Bill Belichick.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think Brian Flores would be hilarious. Maybe he could send himself a early text to Bill Belichick congratulating himself on getting the on getting the Patriots job. Um,
I
I
forgot about that.
that would be absolutely hilarious. But yeah, both of those, Gerard Mayo kind of gives the Antonio Pierce, D'Amico Ryan's type vibe. So that would be super exciting, and he has been a good coach. And I know there was rumors about him potentially becoming the Patriots' next head coach. So I really like those two candidates. I think they would both, all three of these actually seem very, very Patriot-like. So I love it.
Yeah, the Patriots are fun. I'm really interested to see what they do, and we'll go on to the Commanders. Excited to see what the Commanders do. We both have been kind of clamoring for Ron Rivera to be fired for a while. He's a great guy. I love the guy. He's a legend, but just not really in the modern day. He's not really a top head coach, sadly. So I do think it was time to move on from him. This should be an interesting job. I feel like they've got a lot of work to do. They still got to figure out that quarterback position. So this is kind of a hard one to predict for their head coach. But let's hear your top three.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go on a little tent or a little rager for why is Ron, as we're recording this, Ron Rivera is still the head coach of the Washington Commanding Redskins. So not really sure about that, but here we are, almost 2024, and Ron Rivera is still the head coach. But that's why they're on our list right here. And so yeah, my number one, there has been rumors that the Commanders are interested in Bill Belichick, and I think that would make a lot of sense. I think Bill Belichick would bring that winning mentality. I think he could really, I mean, what he's done with the Patriots defense year after year, I think the Commanders have a lot more talent. I think he'd be able to do a complete 180 and make them one of the better defenses, probably a top five in the NFL. And I think this is a team where he could be very power hungry. where he could be the GM and the head coach. And I've there's been reports that I've seen constantly that the Commanders would have no problem trading a first or giving two firsts to the Patriots for a Bill Belichick. So they'd have no problem unloading the farm to bring in a head coach that would change their organization. So that's why he's going to ultimately be my number one here. I think this would probably be his best fit, and I think it would be honestly the Commanders' best option. I think Bill Belichick would just bring that winning mentality to a team that has struggled for so long to find out how to win. So I'd absolutely love that. My number two is going to be Dan Quinn. I think this is a very attractive spot for him too. This is a team that's kind of built around their defense. Obviously they unloaded Montez Sweat and Chase Young this offseason, which was just a head scratcher. I don't understand why, especially Montez Sweat. But you still got the Bama brothers. You still got, Emmanuel Forbes. You guys still got a lot of talent on this defense. And bringing in a guy like Dan Quinn, who's absolutely transitioned the Cowboys defense. And as you can see with the trend of the Commanders, I really feel like they need a hard-nosed veteran, defensive-minded guy who's proven to be a good coach, who's proven to have a good defense. And that's why I have Dan Quinn. And then obviously number three, another guy, another kind of culture changer, Brian Flores. I feel like Ron Rivera was just too content with losing. I feel like he even said it. This is going to be a 5-year project. No, this is going to be we're going to come in here and we're going to be competitive right away project. And that's the mentality that all three of these guys have. And that's the mentality that Brian Flores would bring into this is we don't need no 5 years. We're going to come in here. We're going to have a top defense. We're going to find somebody who works at quarterback and we're going to go out there and we're going to compete and win games. So this is not a 5-year project. And 5 years, Ron Rivera's done nothing. So let's bring in a hard-headed, a mean guy. We need a bad guy at coach just come in here and absolutely change the attitude and the mentality of the Commanders.
No, I love it. It's clear that the number one thing that the Commanders need is a complete culture change, a complete 180 opposite culture change to whatever they had. They need to completely switch it up, change everything, nuke their whole entire organization and completely change everything. So I'll get into mine because I went a similar direction. Bill Belichick has to be the number one dream option. It just feels like a perfect fit. He is the guy that would completely flip and change around this culture, and he's what they need. He's everything they need to get these players bought in again, to get Washington kind of serious again, because no one's really taken this organization serious yet. So I do think Bill Belichick is kind of the dream to get everything turned around here, to get everything changed. And I think Bill Belichick would just be a perfect fit. So I think that has to be the number one dream fit. Just my number one dream spot for Bill Belichick and my number one dream coach for the Redskins. So it's just a perfect fit. And then my number two is going to be Brian Flores. You had him as well. It just seems like a perfect fit as well. He's the definition of a culture change, a hard-nosed, a hard-ass guy. He's going to be perfect for the Redskins, what they need to do. I do like both those options. Then I'm going to go with kind of a different option to kind of switch it up for our last option for the Commanders. I'm going to go Bobby Slowick. I think getting an offensive mind in there, a new young offensive mind that can complement whatever your new quarterback is. I think it'd be fun getting Slowick and kind of getting him his quarterback of, his rookie quarterback of his choice, and kind of letting Slowick work with him and change the culture that way. So I do think going either direction would be fun. Just completely change it up. That's the only thing you need to do. And then I guess we'll mention why Eric Bieniemy isn't on either of our lists. He's a good coach. There's a reason he's never been hired as a head coach. You can look at his Wikipedia. We don't really need to get into it. Just search Eric Bieniemy Wikipedia. But yeah, I don't really see him being a head coach. It's been a long time. He hasn't, gotten the job for a reason. But he is a really good offensive mind. So if they do go a defensive mind, I think keeping Eric Bieniemy as their offensive coordinator could be really perfect as well. So really excited for the Commanders. Anything else you want to say for the Commanders?
You know what I just realized? Bill Belichick beat the Broncos out of nowhere. The New England Patriots moved to the 4 spot. The Commanders moved to the 3 spot. Oh, ho, ho.
Your
He might
conspiracy
be
checked
cooking.
out.
He might be cooking. He might be cooking. And then one other side note on Ron Rivera again. I think if any coach ever comes into your office and says we need a 5-year plan, you tell him to get the hell out of your office. You say we're going to be competitive this year, and you give him the Sean McVay mentality, and I don't care if we have to, trade all our draft picks or we have to do nothing. We have 12 seventh round picks. We're gonna make something work and we're gonna be competitive. So Ron Rivera being a coach here in 2023 and hopefully by 2024, which is tomorrow, he's no longer a coach.
Yeah, probably time to retire. In 2023, a 5-year plan, no one has the patience for that. It's just not a thing anymore. And yeah, that is funny. Your conspiracy, you might have checked out because it was a big conspiracy that Bill Belichick was tanking, but we didn't realize it was for another team, his next team. So Drake May is now a commander for Bill Belichick. That's just incredible. Be excited for the Commanders, and we'll get on to the next team. That we'll go with the Falcons, who it's not it's far from confirmed that Arthur Smith is about to get fired, but let's just say we both are praying and hoping, and I think everyone on the face of the earth is praying and hoping that honestly the Falcons lose out just so Arthur Smith gets fired. It's kind of to that point where it just feels like fate that he isn't an NFL head coach. It seems like the Falcons are going to start losing here because he can't be their coach next year. He's holding them back so much. They're such a fun young team with so much talent, so much offensive talent, and there's a lot of coaches that would love to take this job with this roster. So hopefully it is not Arthur Smith for Falcons fans' sake. We're not trying to be rude. We just want you guys to have a top coach and a top quarterback because you guys can be real contenders with that. So I'm excited to hear your top three.
Yeah, this is again, this is a very appealing job. And if Arthur Smith is not fired, I mean, he's proven what he can lead this team to do. This team has so much young talent. I mean, you pretty much ruined Kyle Pitt's development. You've pretty much just held, Bijan on a leash and haven't even let him run free yet. And it's just wild to me that you can still have Arthur Smith and just not a just the honestly he's just terrible. He's a terrible coach, and the fact that he still has a job, the fact that he's not been fired. I mean, this team was too good. They're too good and they're too competitive. I mean, with Jesse Bates on dude, you got cornerstone pieces that you can really build around, and Arthur Smith has just proven that all he does is just restraint his players, and he restrains his best players, and he's just so stubborn in his ways, and you need somebody better. So I will get into my top three here. And number one being Bobby Slowick. We need a young guy, we need an offensive minded guy. We need somebody that can go out there and, change the culture from whatever Arthur Smith has done and whatever he has tainted on this culture. We need somebody like Bobby Slowick who would be fun to pair up with, like, if you end up drafting a young quarterback, if you get a Bo Nix, if you get a Michael Penix, if you trade up or do something like that, or even if you get a Russell Wilson, you get a young-minded guy like Bobby Slowick who can come in here, ultimately get along with your quarterback, really help develop, your Kyle Pitts, your Drake London, your Bijan Robinson. You start moving forward with your offense because they've seemed to be, ultimately what's held you back. And then at number two, which is kind of everyone's dream scenario, Ben Johnson, which this could, if given if Arthur Smith is fired, this could be a very attractive spot for Ben Johnson because he might get to go out there and pick his quarterback of flavor, and go out here and have a Bijan Robinson and have a Drake London and have a Kyle Pitts all on his offense, and a Cordarrelle Patterson, and have offensive playmakers that he could turn this offense very, very lethal very fast. And so that would obviously be given whether they'd want to pay his salary, given whether they move off of Arthur Smith. But this would actually be a job that I think Ben Johnson and the Falcons would have both have mutual interest in it because it's kind of an attractive spot for both of them, and where they could, kind of he could build his own quarterback, which would be awesome. And then at number three, just because I feel like he has to get an interview at some point for a head coaching job, which he has a million times, but maybe Eric Bieniemy, just because the offensive coordinator pool from the NFL is not huge in this draft. There's not a lot of offensive guys, to be honest with you. It seems like all the good ones have already been snatched up. So there's just a handful of them. And Eric Bieniemy is one of them. Obviously, he's had success in Kansas City. Obviously, he had Sam Howell at the beginning of the season actually playing decent. They've kind of fallen apart here at the end. But I think he would be a coach worth interviewing just because he's been around winning organizations. He's had successful offenses. And I think at some point some point, maybe I'm just completely off. I think at some point he might get hired to be a head coach.
Yeah, he'll definitely get interviews again. And Ben Johnson, just this fit right here, Ben Johnson with whatever new Falcons quarterback they get with all the talent that they have, this would be an absolute beautiful dream. And I do want to talk about Slowick because I think that Slowick hiring would be really fun. I like you having him at one because he's just the complete opposite of Arthur Smith. You can't draw up a more of an opposite person than Arthur Smith than Bobby Slowick. He has a he worked at PFF. He's really into advanced stats, metrics. He knows he's kept in the loop about the NFL. He knows that you need to target Kyle Pitts. He's smart enough to know that you need to target Drake Lennon and Bijan Robinson. So he would be really fun. He would lean into all these stars. He would work with whatever quarterback they get really well. So I think Slowick would be really, really fun. I'll go into my top three. He's my number two, and you're making me want him even more. I think Slowick would be a perfect fit for the Falcons. It's a really, really fun one. He would just be a perfect complement with his modern analytical thinking. I think it is what the Falcons need, honestly. That's why they need to get to go away from Arthur Smith. And then my number one is Brian Johnson for the Eagles. Similarly, I think he's just a really good mind. He's got the Eagles as a top five scoring unit. He's like we said, he's worked with a lot of quarterbacks really well. So if you draft a quarterback of his choice and let him work with that quarterback and mold that quarterback and build a team around that quarterback. I think Brian Johnson, just like Slowick, would be really, really good in that role. And then let's shout out one last guy, or I guess a new guy, Frank Smith. He kind of just feels like a Falcon. He's the offensive coordinator for the Dolphins behind Mike McDaniel. He's kind of been in that Shanahan tree, and whoever's next in line for that Shanahan tree is usually a pretty good head coach. So I did want to mention Frank Smith. He does feel like a Falcon, and I do think Frank Smith is also a modern thinking guy. That's kind of the opposite of Arthur Smith as well. So I do think all three of these options would be kind of dreams, perfect, and culture changing for the Falcons, what they need.
Yeah, I really, really like that you put Frank Smith on here. I have a little bit of familiarity with him as he was the Chargers' offensive run game coordinator and offensive line coach. And that was the year that Rashawn Slater was an all-pro and that the line was at their best. And he's just been an absolute stud and he was a delight to have at that position. And he goes over to the Dolphins and he's been able to with a makeshift offensive line have them as an incredible unit. I mean, their offensive line has quite frankly not been very good, and it hasn't been healthy. And Frank Smith, he is such a brilliant mind with the offensive line, and he's such a forward thinker, and he's been able to turn, I think he's kind of resurrected Austin Jackson's career. So Frank Smith has been a guru in that sense with the offensive line. He's a very seasoned, coach, and he anywhere he's gone, he's improved what his job title has been. And so I really like you actually putting Frank Smith as a head coaching candidate. I absolutely love him. He's definitely a locker room dude. The guys love him, and yeah, he has ties. He was brought in with Shane Day, who was from the 49ers, who's worked under the Kyle Shanahan tree. So, and now he's been with Mike McDaniels, and so he's got these different seasonings on him, and you love to see all that different stuff, and he's a great head coach. So a great head coach candidate. So I absolutely love that you put him on here.
Yeah, Frank Smith does just have a lot of different type of, backgrounds and different types of offenses he can kind of pull from, and kind of like Mike McDaniel, he doesn't have one offense. He kind of branched out from the Shanahan tree, and yeah, that's how Frank Smith is going to be. So he's obviously deserving coming from that tree. It's going to be an exciting candidate. And one last name is I honestly genuinely don't know if there is any bad blood. I know Dan Quinn used to be the Falcons head coach. Obviously, when they lost that Super Bowl to the Patriots, I don't know if he would want to come back, but if did want to go the defensive route, that would honestly be a perfect fit too.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, Dan Quinn maybe another run that would actually be kind of cool.
All right, and let's go on to the next team. We have them last. This is the last team we'll talk about. It's the New Orleans Saints, and we have them last. We'll quickly kind of talk about it because we don't know if Dennis Allen will be fired. We both kind of think it's time to move on from Allen. That's why we put him on here. I honestly, personally thought that they would move away from Dennis Allen last offseason when they, made the big changes to Derek Carr. It makes sense keeping Dennis Allen with Derek Carr, two veterans together. But personally, I think we both think that they just need to get away from Derek Carr too this offseason. So I think they do need kind of a clean slate, a blank slate to start over. So we'll quickly go over this one because Dennis Allen very well could be back. But let's hear your top three in case he gets fired.
Yeah. this team and this organization needs a hard reset. They keep kicking the can down the road and they can't kick it down the road any further. So yeah, they need to move on from Dennis Allen. They need to put the nail in the coffin with their cap because they've been in cap. I mean they've been incredible at maneuvering the cap year in year out. But I think it's this time to stop kicking the can down the road and just have a hard reset. And so yeah, I'll get into my top three. And with number one, I think Mike McDonald would be an incredible coach. I think the culture he'd bring over from having the Jim Harbaugh and the John Harbaugh experience would just be incredible. I think he's just a forward thinking, smarter, younger, way better defensive coach than Dennis Allen could ever be. And so that's ultimately why he's my number one. And I think there quite frankly needs to be a spot for Mike McDonald because he's too good of a coach, and this Ravens defense is the best defense in the NFL right now. He's got them playing absolutely lights out, and he's just proven to be a winner, and he's proven to have a good defense wherever he goes, and that is so valuable to teams. And so Mike McDonald should be a head coaching. He should be a head coach in the NFL, and I think it should be this year. And I think the Saints would be brilliant for bringing in a younger guy like this. And then number two, we run the defensive side of the ball here. Let's go offensive side of the ball. Obviously, we've been talking about Bobby Slowick, a forward-thinking PFF analytical guy. I think that would be incredible. I think really anything. I think the trend of this one for me is younger head coaches, and doing a hard reset and letting them kind of build up your team. And so I'll obviously move into Brian Johnson, who would be absolutely incredible. He's got that winning mentality coming over from the Eagles. He's got to work hand in hand with Nick Sirianni, Jonathan Gannon, Shane Steichen. I mean, hell, you even have the experience from working with Howie Roseman. So, you have to love, the background of this guy and what he could, bring in from a hard reset. So I think these three coaches would be fantastic for a hard reset. They're younger, they're forward thinking. And I think all of them would be great. But as me and you saw today this morning before, after we've already had this, that it looks like reports are showing that Dennis Allen is going to get one more year as the Saints head coach, which maybe that's just smoke, but we'll see.
Yeah, the report by Ian Rappaport says barring a late season debacle. So I honestly could see a late season debacle from the Saints. I see the Buccaneers winning this division. I think we both do. So hopefully they do move on because you're number one, Mike McDonald. He is like just a Dennis Allen, like a modern Dennis Allen, a better Dennis Allen. I would just replace him. It's like a one-for-one replacement. He's just a younger, kind of more modern thinking, could help your offense more, a better CEO guy that relates with the players more. I do think Mike McDonald would just be the easy one-for-one replacement. And I'll say he's not on my top three because I just want to completely change the Saints culture in this scenario. I just want to go offense. I want to try to get the Sean Payton regen. So I'll go with the obvious one, number one, Ben Johnson.
Really, it's brilliant. I didn't even think of that.
Coming back to where he started with Sean Payton and Dan Campbell in New Orleans, if they can pull this off, obviously it would be way worth getting rid of Dennis Allen. If Ben Johnson's interested in this reunion, I think it's just beautiful getting that Sean Payton regen. He is the next Sean Payton. He might be, better because he's just more modern thinking, not tearing down his quarterback's confidence. So I do think that Ben Johnson's just the obvious number one dream option for the Saints that we can get out of the way. And then my number two is kind of an obvious one as well. You had him, Brian Johnson. I just think whatever. I mean, if it's Derek Carr, Brian Johnson will work well with him. He works just well with any quarterback. But if you bring in a new quarterback, then Brian Johnson could be a really, really big boost to your franchise. It could be valuable in developing that quarterback, building around that quarterback. That's what he specializes in. And Brian Johnson also is really good at just scouting around the NFL. He started out as a scout at Utah. He's just a good, scout, and he's in the know about the players in the league. So I do think Brian Johnson just deserves a shot. And then my last guy is someone that we haven't talked about yet that I think deserves a shout out, Dave Canales, for the Buccaneers. He's kind of had a revelation season with Baker Mayfield in his first year as an offensive coordinator coming over from Seattle. He's just been awesome with Baker. He's kind of tapping into what Baker does best. He's letting Baker ball out, and he's kind of hiding his flaws by his play calling. So I do think he's had flawless play calling this year that kind of deserves at least some interviews. And I think this would be a good fit. We had the Bears as well before it was announced that Eberflus was coming back. I would like him to go to the Bears, but yeah, I think Dave Canales gets get some interviews because he's really had like flawless play calling for the Bucks. So
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And we'll ultimately see if this debacle happens, which it definitely could. But we had to definitely throw in all the teams that we honestly think should have new head coach hires, and so that's ultimately why the Saints are on this one.
and honestly, like you said with Mike McDonald, for I think defense is a good way to go for Saints as well. I just didn't mention it, but also Brian Flores. I think Brian Flores kind of fits the Saints mold perfectly. He might be the best coach for that Saints mentality if they want to keep a defensive mind in here. But I just personally want to change it to offense. But yeah, that was really fun going over all the coaches. We have a lot of offseason content coming out soon. A lot of draft content, a lot of free agency content will be coming out. So I think we're both really excited for the off season. These are our favorite podcasts to do. So if you guys have any ideas, definitely comment below. But yeah, thanks for joining, Josh. That was really fun.
Yeah, this was an awesome one, and definitely nerd stuff. We love looking into all this stuff and connecting the dots. So a lot more, once we get into the off season, a lot of content like this coming. So super fun, super excited we got to do this. Thank you for the 500 subscribers, and let's keep getting more so we can do more bonus episodes.
Definitely. Yeah, we know a lot of you guys are looking forward to 2024 already. The season's for like half the teams in the NFL, the season's kind of irrelevant. We're already moved on to 2024 and it's a fun time. So we're really excited to put out some more content and yeah, it was fun predicting where all the head coaching carousel kind of falls. And yeah, thanks for joining. Thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe if you liked, and peace.
Yep, happy New Year's. Peace.
Happy New Year's. I forgot.